This episode of Us and Them is supported with a grant from the Claude Worthington Benedum Foundation.
Hey, Trey Kay here, and from West Virginia Public Broadcasting and PRX, this is Us and Them. The show that tells the stories about the things that divide us. Recently, I was talking with a friend about her son. He's in his 20s and in a difficult situation right now. Her son graduated from high school a few years back, and he went to college for a brief time, but felt kind of lost and had no sense of direction or purpose. He's been at home for a couple of years while he figures things out. He's not working either. It's kind of an awkward, embarrassing situation for both of them. But as it turns out, they're not alone. In fact, there are so many people in this same situation, not working or going to school, that there's a name for it: disconnected youth. And here in West Virginia, it's a big issue. A study from 2017 found that 17% of people age 16 to 24 here in the Mountain State aren't going to school or working a job. That's one of the highest rates in the nation, second only to Alaska and well above the 12% national average. These disconnected young people are hard to track down. There's a lot of shame and stigma when you drop out of school and don't have a job. But with such a high rate of young people experiencing that disconnect in the state, there are programs that try to reestablish a connection. And my co-producer, Kyle Vass, went to Elkins, West Virginia to see one of these programs in action.
Hi. Hey, I'm Kyle.
Hi, Kyle. It's for whatever reason, we've busted into chaos right now. You're not recording, are you?
I mean, always, yeah. Are you Michelle?
I am.
Michelle Ferris is the director of Youth Build in Elkins, West Virginia. This is part of a federally funded program designed to help young people pursue education and job training. As Michelle opens the door, I'm greeted by Gus and Beezy.
I'd like to say they're therapy dogs, but that's clearly not true.
Beezy, come on, girl.
Try therapy for that.
Please come in.
Yeah.
We walk down a hallway and pass a few offices until we get to the last door.
This is our classroom. They are actually in the middle of a math lesson because these three are studying to earn their task.
What's task?
That's it's the new GED. It's the high school equivalency test of adult secondary completion.
So the first one we're going to take a look at is number 2. Could someone read that number to me, please?
Brandon Nicely is teaching a math concept to a handful of teenagers who seem to be getting the hang of it.
Moving back to the left. So instead of 4, what are we going to use, Allie? Negative 4. So the answer would be 4.2 times 10 to the negative 4th power.
The 3 students here are all high school age, but this isn't high school. Youth Build works with young people ages 16 to 24 who have started to disconnect from things like school or work.
Now that we're done with those, go ahead and, if you haven't already, do the word problems. And then after you're all finished with those, we will go over them.
Michelle says most of the young people here would be categorized as disconnected youth. In addition to working as the director, she's the case manager for her crew members. That's what they call the students in the program.
A lot of them have not had basic needs met for a while. They haven't been to the dentist. They haven't been to a doctor. They need to get eyeglasses. They don't have a driver's license. They can't find their social security card or their birth certificate. So we walk through those things to get them to a stable place where they then feel comfortable to even be in a classroom and start thinking about their education, start getting marketable job skills.
Michelle says one of many reasons that her crew members end up here is that traditional school just doesn't work for them.
Whether it is in the classroom and learning how to take it out of the classroom into a job site, or you're actually building on the job site, it's hands-on learning. So is the rest of the things that we focus on, like getting your driver's license. It's kind of they do it through experience. And I think once they learn how to do it, like they know how to navigate the DMV, they know what paperwork they need to have. They don't go in 4 or 5 times without the proper paperwork because they do all that here.
Youth Build offers young people 2 educational options. One focuses on construction skills, and the other trains them for a career in the healthcare industry. But unlike traditional school, Youth Build pays young people to be here.
They get an educational stipend in the classroom. That's $4.50 an hour. We're building a house. So if we take them to the construction job site, they get $8.75 an hour. We are funded by the Department of Labor. We have a 3-year grant that allows us to serve 70 young people in a 4-county area.
Michelle says her program works with partners in the community, like school counselors, judges, social workers, to identify at-risk youth. They get young people into Youth Build to help them reconnect with society. One of the people who was steered to Elkins Youth Build now helps run it.
My name is Cheryl Harmon, and I'm a 2015 graduate.
And what do you do here?
So I am the program assistant.
What does that entail? Like, what's your day-to-day?
So day-to-day is pretty much administrative work, answering the phones, filing paperwork, making sure that all of our crew members' files are up to date, they're not missing any paperwork, and then all the in-betweens, if we have service projects or anything that needs to be done in the classroom or just anything that I can do to support our staff and our crew members.
What would you say that, like, through most of your crew members that you've helped, what is the disconnection point? Like, where does a lot of that come from?
You know, it's funny you asked that because that was actually one question I had to ask them when I was doing their paperwork. And surprisingly, majority of them said that the other students and the teachers, they said it was their peers and the teachers. They felt bullied. They were disconnected. They just felt out of touch with the classroom and the learning style in the classroom. But it was like my peers. I just couldn't handle the pressure of being bullied or just not being, accepted in the high school they went to.
Yeah, and so a lot of these folks are at some point dropping out of high school or middle school. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think only a couple young people I've come across stopped in middle school, but majority of them stop about 9th grade.
Sherelle got involved with the Elkins Youth Build program just after she moved to West Virginia, about 7 years ago.
I had 3 kids. I was a single mom. I had no money. I just lost my house, lost my first car, and I needed a fresh start.
A friend of Sherelle's suggested she check out Elkins, West Virginia.
And I came here and I found affordable housing within 9 months, moved my young family here. I was 22 years old. My youngest was 2 weeks old. I got here and I went to social service because I knew I would need assistance to get me back on my feet, like food stamps and things like that. And the caseworker there said, well, what do you want to do work-wise?
Sherelle told the caseworker that she wanted to help people. That's when she learned about Youth Build.
And I joined the crew. I was hired on in January of 2015. From there, my life took off from AmeriCorps to travel in the United States, being a public speaker, being a leadership consultant, and now I'm program assistant. And 7 years, I went from being homeless, a college dropout, a single mom with no money, no nothing, and now I'm a college graduate. And I'm a program assistant of a nonprofit, a very accredited nonprofit, and I'm going to be buying my first house this year.
And the house Sherelle is buying, Youth Build crew members are building it. Michelle takes me to Sherelle's future house, or the Harmon House. It's an 8-minute drive from the Elkins Youth Build building. One of the crew members at the work site is Dayton Eisenhart. He's in his final year at Youth Build and is learning how to build houses.
So this is going to be her house?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Cool. And are you the teacher?
I'm a construction site supervisor. I'm working with Dayton today. And
Dayton, you going to give us the tour?
I guess I can.
Cool. Let's see what you've done.
Today I was painting this hallway. I paint this room, this closet, and this room in here.
Looks good, man.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Outside, I've done the siding on the front with Jesse, one of the other youth builders. And Me and Xander done the siding on this side sometime this week. So whenever we started over here, we had to lap through and put a bunch of bolts into the pipe over there. And then we started on this side. I had to crawl in and put a hole for the water spigot there. Sometime next week, I think we're going to be finishing this side's siding and then the back side.
Back at Youth Build, the crew members are finishing up their day. Part of their routine is to circle up and talk about how the day went.
Dayton, how was your day?
I had a great day.
All right. What did you get done?
I got like 4 rooms painted.
So did you get, like you've already primed and now you're putting on the...
First coat.
Wow. It's pretty. That's awesome. You are a good painter, so...
Thank you.
Thanks for all your hard work. It's looking good over there.
No problem. Thank you.
And you fixing those little closets real well.
Yeah. Yeah. Way better than we do. Oh, no. Oh, man.
Paint it with my belly.
Like, oh, there went all the paint. Oh. Yeah. All right.
How was your day?
Oh, my day was fantastic. I think my head's still spinning. This place was crazy today.
Yeah.
Holy,
What happened?
there was a lot going on today. That's right. But it makes for a day that goes really quick.
What stands out to me is that a program like Youth Build helps disconnected young people make connections. Students learn hands-on work. Students develop working relationships with one another. Youth Build is one program that's pulling young people into the workforce. But the Elkins site can only sustain about 20 crew members in a year. With 17% of young people in West Virginia not working or in school, that leaves a lot of people unaccounted for. And it's an uphill battle trying to get West Virginia teenagers to finish high school or pursue higher education. Census data show the state ranks 41st in the number of students who attain a high school diploma. And the state ranks dead last in the number of people who get a bachelor's degree. So, to figure out what the state is going to do to get more young people educated, I contacted Sarah Tucker. She's the Chancellor of Higher Education for the state of West Virginia. I asked Tucker how she feels when she hears that West Virginia is tied for the highest rate of disconnected youth in the nation.
Well, that statistic bothers me a lot. So does our college going rate. I know that we have some of the best programs that you could ask for in higher education in the state of West Virginia. Our colleges are affordable. We have financial aid packages and programs that help people get through college. And unfortunately, we just don't have students accessing those programs. And so what it tells me is that higher ed needs to do a better job of making sure that students know what is available to them, how much money is available to them, and that these programs that they're going to can lead to high-wage jobs.
I mean, is it just that higher ed is not getting the message out? I'm wondering if these numbers say anything more about West Virginia. Like, what does it say about the youth, the families they come from, the economic opportunities, or even, I guess, their perception of the education system in general?
Well, we know that West Virginia doesn't have a higher ed going culture, right? I mean, we know that historically in West Virginia, the jobs that have been available and well-paying jobs that have been available to families for generations have not required higher education in many instances. And so that culture that is part of the fabric of many other states in our country is not part of the fabric of West Virginia necessarily.
What do you think of that classification or that characterization of these people as disconnected youth?
I generally don't like to characterize people in a negative connotation, and disconnected youth seems to me to be a negative connotation. I'm sure that those students are connected to something. It's our job to figure out what they're connected to tap into that, and to get them to connect to other things.
I'm wondering, is this a problem that has gone back for generations, maybe even 100 years?
I think it certainly has become more prevalent since the economy in West Virginia has changed, and since those jobs that only require a high school diploma or less have started to shrink. I think it is more related to the economy and less related to higher ed.
But as we look at West Virginia and you put that in the context of the rest of the nation, that group of people that are 20 to 24, That is some of the highest numbers in the country. What can be done to better serve or connect them or get the message to them that if they are going to succeed in life and be able to raise families and actually participate in the workforce, that I guess they need to get with programs that your department is offering?
Yeah, and a lot of it has to do with what you see reflected in your own community. And that's true of all of rural America. There's this intergenerational closure that happens across rural America, not just southern West Virginia, but you grow up, your family has lived in an area for years, generations upon generations of your family have lived in that area for years, and you do the jobs that are or are not reflected in the town that you live in. Lots of people don't want to leave. Lots of people have lots of reasons why they can't leave. They have, their finances invested in their homes. They love their homes. They love their families. They want to live near their parents and their grandparents and their aunts and their uncles. And there are no jobs there. And so what are they supposed to do in that situation?
COVID hit West Virginia's economy hard. The state's unemployment rate hit a 10-year high in 2020. The pandemic has also caused record levels of learning loss. So, young people have less education as they look for fewer job opportunities. Chancellor Tucker says the best way to help steer young people in the state back to education is to provide points of personal connection.
I've studied this for my entire life, and the way that people get into college who are first-generation rural college goers is often by just a simple contact with a human being, telling them that it's something that they can do and encouraging them to move forward and to apply to college and to re-engage. And so that's something that I talk about all the time when I go to Rotaries or different business conventions, et cetera. People think that they have to bite off this monumental, the college going rate's 52%. So we have to get 48% of students to come back. I don't need folks to worry about 48%. I need folks to worry about the kid that they have access to. I need them to talk to the student that they have access to and say to them, hey, what do you want to do with your life? What are you interested in? Have you heard about college? Have you heard about this program? Have you heard about the financial aid that's here in West Virginia? If I could get half of the adults in West Virginia to talk to students about that, we wouldn't have a college going problem in the state of West Virginia. We'd have students that were engaged and students that were going to college.
Chancellor Tucker says she recognizes that not every young person is college-bound for a 4-year degree. But what shocks her more is the low number of students who go on to community college.
So only 9% of recent high school graduates matriculate onto a community college in the state of West Virginia. 9% to a community college. Now many more go on to a baccalaureate institution, but only 9% go on to a community college. So that number is absurd. I mean, there's no other way for me to say that. That's a ridiculous number. That number needs to be 3 times more than what it is, or 4 times more than what it is. Those students who are not going to college, who are not working, who are wondering what they should be doing, have access to community college in the state. And because of what the legislature has done over the past couple of years, they have access to community college for free. They don't have to pay anything. Just this year, the legislature changed the West Virginia Invest program. Before, it didn't cover some of the academic program costs, but the legislature said, no, that doesn't make sense to us anymore. And so they're allowing it to cover some of those academic program costs. It's free. For heaven's sakes, we have these incredible programs that have 100% placement rate, and we're having trouble getting students to fill the classroom. That's nuts. We need to be able to talk to our students and talk to the kids that are around us about that type of programming and let them know that there are really great options available to them here in West Virginia.
Are there other obstacles?
Well, life gets in the way for a lot of students, life is challenging. And for many of our students, you have students who are parents. You have students who are taking care of parents. You have students who are independent and taking care of themselves. And so it's not necessarily just about covering tuition and fees, right? Having tuition and fees covered is amazing, but they also have to have an apartment and they have to pay for their car payment and all of these other things. And so that becomes really challenging for our students.
In the K-12 school process, Is there a certain age when a person is no longer welcome in the system? They age out of the program?
You can't be 25 and still be a senior in high school, right? I mean, you do age out at some point. The exact age, I'm not sure of. I think I saw in the legislature this year, and I don't know if it passed or not, frankly, an attempt to extend the age for one more year for students to graduate, I think until they were 19, maybe. I think it was because of the pandemic, yeah. And I honestly don't know what the status of that bill was. I just saw it going through.
We've been talking about people in West Virginia who are in areas that don't have a culture of higher education. And they are with parents who have college educations and who have hopes for their children to go on to higher learning. And they realize that this is important. And they're having trouble motivating their youth out of this stuck place. Do you have advice for them?
What I keep trying to encourage students and families to think about is, especially during this past year, we've just been thinking about how to stay safe, right? We've been thinking about how to stay safe. We haven't been planning for our futures. We haven't gone in that space. And so we need to start planning for our futures. And I think one of the problems that we have in West Virginia, particularly around college, is that the conversation hasn't been around the spectrum of things that college can offer. The conversation has been about very specific four-year liberal arts degrees, which are terrific. I have one, but they don't appeal to every single person. We don't have that conversation about, well, this is what a big college looks like or a big university looks like. This is what a medium-sized one looks like. This is what a small one looks like. This is what a community college can offer you. We really just have those conversations around, frankly, big football programs, right? I mean, we're not having the conversation about, here are all of the things that you can do with your life. And it looks different. And a lot of times people have experience, their own experience. Guidance counselors, for example, all went to baccalaureate institutions. They don't have experience with community colleges. They don't know what those options are. And so it's hard for them to be able to guide students towards them. So we need to do a better job of making sure that everybody knows what the programs are and the options are for our students so that they can pick and choose amongst all of the options and not just think it's a one size fits all, because it's not a one size fits all. It's just not. But we haven't done a great job of getting that message out. And I'm working really hard to try to do a better job of that now.
That conversation with Chancellor Tucker helped me see a new direction for the state. To try and get young people into community college and training programs. Another option is the Youth Build model, to offer an alternative path for young people who struggle with the traditional education track. But with 17% of the state's young people not connected with school or work or training, there's more to account for. Coming up after a break, we'll hear from a child psychologist who helps young adults in West Virginia find their path. And we'll take a visit to a day shelter that specializes in young people, 16 through 24, without a home. You're listening to Us and Them. This program is supported in part by the West Virginia Humanities Council and the CRC Foundation. This episode is supported with a grant from the Claude Worthington Benedum Foundation.
Music lifts us up and brings us together, even when we can't get together in person. Mountain Stage brings you live performances on the air, online, and in our podcast. They remind you how it feels to be in a live audience listening to live music. This is Larry Gross, host of Mountain Stage. Find a link to our stations and our podcast online at mountainstage.org.
Hey, it's Trey, and this is Us and Them from West Virginia Public Broadcasting and PRX. The statistic may be simple. 17% of West Virginia's young people from 16 to 24 are not in school or working. But in fact, there's a complex set of circumstances that give the state one of the highest rates of disconnected youth in the country. Earlier, we heard about Youth Build, the program designed to give young people an alternative education track. And we heard how the state is trying to keep young people from ending their education right after high school. But as Chancellor Sarah Tucker says, sometimes life gets in the way. For many of the clients at First Steps in Huntington, West Virginia, life is filled with challenges. First Steps works with young people who are homeless. And as my co-producer Kyle Vass reports, some of the state's young people are surviving more than just a disconnect from school or work. They have no stable home and are coping with a range of issues.
John Prentice's desk is located in a corner of the office space for First Steps, a day program for unsheltered youth. This office is a giant open room that's about the dimensions of a basketball court. John is a therapist here.
My day-to-day is pretty kind of fluid. It can look like me writing notes, seeing to general behavioral health concerns. So like, hey, I haven't had my anxiety treated in a long time, and I'm looking for a provider so I can provide a referral there. Or it can look like, hey, there's this huge crisis going on. We need you here now to de-escalate the situation. So hop in your car and go. It's anywhere in between.
Was there any point at ages 16 to 24 in your own life where you felt the pull of a potential existence wherein you're not doing school, you're not doing work, you're just trying to like maybe survive?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Elkins, West Virginia, in a fairly lower middle class family who had periods of some pretty acute poverty. And as a queer teenager trying to figure out, okay, what comes next out of this tiny town, there was a lot of like, hey, where do I go? Where do I look up? How do I get connected? Like, and if it wasn't for the social connections that I was fortunate enough to have, there is no way that a lot of this stuff wouldn't have happened, because I was already didn't have the money. I didn't have social advantage in a lot of cases with other people outside my social group. And so unless I had people that are like, oh, here's how to do this, here's how to do this, there's no way I would have gotten the drive to go to college or the push to, keep going further and, get on this cycle that kind of, once it's clunky, but once it gets into gear, it can kind of get you going. Because as we've seen nationally, and it's even more acute here, a large chunk of, depending on where you are in the country, it's between 10 to 25% of people do not transition, quote unquote, successfully into adulthood. And that successfulness is defined 1,000 different ways, but it could be access to medical care. It could be holding down a job. It could be stably housed. It could be any sort of things. So any of those categories, there's like a 1 in 4 chance that a person may not do that successfully. And that tells me that there's a larger institutional problem at work here, where there's, a little bit better than a coin flip that you're not going to end up connected to a essential resource,
So that's a thing that's studied.
Yeah, it is. Not very well, but it is starting to come into vogue. But rural transitional youth there's almost no reseach on right now. A lot of this research is coming out of larger cities, so the phenomenon here is not really well known.
You mentioned queer identity growing up in rural Appalachia. I was really surprised to learn that West Virginia's percentage of people who identify as trans among youth is like, it's not even close. West Virginia's like heads and shoulders above any other state in the nation. I guess how this like might tie back into this is like in your experience, in your capacity, but also like in your work here, is gender identity and the stigma and the discrimination that comes with it. Is that something that you see facing a lot of the people that you interact with?
Absolutely. So the common statistic that's brought out in a lot of these discussions is 40% of homeless youth are somewhere on the LGBT spectrum. And naturally that's higher than the sample size, where we think it's about 10% of the average population is in the LGBT community. So something is causing this distillation up to 40%. And there's a lot of different ideas of what that is, but it has to do ultimately with something is falling apart where these people are losing access to social resources, financial resources, or, community resources. Something's falling apart for these people, and it's causing this distillation of the sexual and gender minorities in the lower classes and homeless communities. And there's obviously some kind of level of discrimination there. And unfortunately, what we see a fair amount of is people, when they come out, they lose that family. They lose that blood relationship. So any sort of social cachet that they had there is now cut off. So they're even more socially impoverished. And so now us at the center are fulfilling familiar roles on top of, workloads. And so we're becoming this kind of family for these people who now have nothing. I think ignoring the intersectionality of race, gender, sexual orientation, ignoring that and trying to look at homelessness in a vacuum, you miss out on all of the nuance.
John says providing a supportive environment for gay, lesbian, and trans youth is essential to help address some of the underlying mental health concerns that contribute to homelessness and disconnections. In addition to providing therapy, First Steps has a life coach, Sarah Bentley.
So when it comes to washing your hands, the rules of thumb are like before you start preparing food, before you eat, after you've used the restroom.
Sarah's walking me through how she teaches cooking to clients at First Steps. Today, it's waffles. She goes over all the basics, like hand washing, because she doesn't want to skip over any of what she calls assumptive knowledge.
Unfortunately, there's when it comes to society, there's these certain things that you should just know by a certain age, according to the general public. That's not the case, and it's really unfortunate. People have what's considered assumptive knowledge. Well, you're such and such age, so you should already know how to do this, so people don't go over those things with people. So we try to do a life skills assessment to see where people are at from a very neutral, non-judgmental way. Do you know how to do these things? And if not, I'm here to help. And unfortunately, like I said, some people don't have that.
Sarah says an activity like making waffles isn't just about whipping up batter and cooking it. Every step is an opportunity to fill in knowledge gaps.
And another thing I always like to, tell our folks when it comes to recipes that we have is sometimes there are words that are used that are just in cooking that you don't interact with, like reading on, a regular basis. So like sifting flour. That's not necessarily your everyday kind of word. So, I'm always down for, let's take a moment and look that word up to make sure that we have a clear understanding of exactly what that means for the process that we're doing. I think one of my favorite moments is when I invited one of our folks to make banana bread with me. And they were like, I can't read. I'm like, that's fine, we'll work through it. It's no big deal. We can talk through it.
So what did you do to help that person learn?
We as people, everybody, not just our youth that we work with, but everyone, we put ourselves down immediately before we even try. I always say try, do what you can on your own, and I'm here to help. I'm not going to just abandon you with it. I'm going to, do what you can, and then we'll either edit it or, work through it or talk through it if you have parts that you don't understand or that you're not comfortable with. And I am always incredibly impressed with how much they do on their own in comparison to what they said they could do.
In addition to hygiene and literacy, teaching someone how to cook food is also a good lesson in personal finances for Sarah.
For instance, with our butter. So we bought a 4-stick pack of butter, and for this recipe, this would be 8 servings. And we're only using 3 tablespoons of butter, right? So I would take the cost of this 4-pack of butter, divide it down to get exactly how much 3 tablespoons of butter would cost, and then divide that again by 8 because that's the amount of servings that would have. So I can get the price per serving, and I can say confidently that it is cheaper than going out to Mickey D's and buying some of their hotcakes.
Sarah says even some of the more basic life skills that people can pick up at First Steps sometimes translate into employment opportunities down the line.
Maybe in that instance, if they've got a new job, I'll work with them on getting their food handler's card, which is set up for free right now through the Cabell County Health Department. But I'll just, help them set up a computer here, have them go through that class. If they need to take a moment and mute themselves and ask me what, something meant that the instructor was saying or things like that, we're available there to help them, but I encourage them to, do it as independently as they can.
First Steps also provides young people who come through their doors recovery coaching. Jamie Lochmanova helps people with addiction, but unlike a lot of places that offer help with recovery, Jamie says she likes to meet people where they are.
I think my first day in, and I was like, hey, I'm the recovery coach, and kind of got some pushback because there had been, I think, a previous recovery coach, and some of them were kind of like, well, we already had a super great recovery coach, like there's no way you're going to top that, and and I'm like, that's okay. I don't have to be perfect to be here. I frequently preach that, recovery isn't all or nothing. Abstinence isn't going to be the only way for everyone. Recovery is based on if you are succeeding the way that you want to succeed. So talking with them about, multiple pathways. That's something that I talk about constantly is that, if at one point in time you were using meth and now you're using, marijuana instead, like if you're using cannabis instead, like overall that's a lot better option than meth or heroin. So if we can get on that harm reduction train, if we can get on that moderation management train, that's going to be really good for some of our folks. I definitely think that some people abstinence only works well for them and they should definitely go for it, but I think for some people in certain situations it's actually going to negatively impact them.
Life skills and recovery are probably go hand in hand because recovery for a lot of people is probably a life skill, if not the life skill that anchors everything else, right?
Recovery is a lot of life skills, but it's life skills in combination with whatever that person's pathway is. So for conflict resolution, a lot of us say the same things over and over to our youth on a pretty consistent basis. We try to be really consistent with them. We try to give them the same language. If they're dealing with a specific problem, we try to give them that same language over and over again. And it feels really good whenever they turn around and they use that same language. So with, some of our youth, something that I kind of preach is if you want to see a better world, you have to be a better person. So you have to put that good out there. And so having them, turn back around and being I'm going to be that good. I'm going to be that better person. I'm not going to start a fight today. I'm going to go home so that way I don't because I'm making better choices and being a better person. It's, I think, a feel-good moment for all of us whenever we've been kind of saying that same thing over and over again. And then they not only follow along with it, but they know the words we're using. They're using the same language and, they're making that change in themselves because they want to, not because we keep preaching it.
Jamie says this approach makes a connection rather than requiring a particular program. Jamie also points out that addiction and recovery aren't just limited to drug use.
You can be addicted to anything, and that even if you don't want to consider, weed a drug, it still can be addictive in your brain. It can still impact your brain in a way that I'm not telling people to do drugs, but if you're using substances before 25, it is going to impact your brain, how your brain develops. Talking with our youth about, even if you don't want to consider it a drug, like it can still be addictive. It can still impact you negatively.
First Steps offers mental health services, life coaching, and recovery, but it also recognizes that there are other things to help their clients with. Here's Sarah again.
I think that the biggest eye-opener, there's certain things that, like with the life skills assessment, that you can't necessarily teach. Like, for instance, one of the questions is, do you have a family member that you could get in touch with if you didn't have anywhere to stay for the night? The majority of the folks that take that assessment say no. That's not anything that I can fix. That's not anything that I can teach. But that's good to know that we need to try to get them linked up with resources.
West Virginia is reaching out to young people who are not working or enrolled in school. We've heard about a program trying to get them jobs, state efforts trying to get them back into school, and even a day shelter trying to help homeless young people get back on their feet. But all of this leaves me wondering, what's going on? What is it about West Virginia that leads so many young people to detach from society? To help me answer these questions, my co-producer, Kyle Vass, spoke with a child psychologist who treats a lot of patients who qualify as disconnected.
My name is Colleen Moran, and I am a licensed clinical psychologist working for Harmony Mental Health.
Colleen Moran has the nice big wooden desk and upholstered seats that you'd expect in a psychologist's office. But she also has a kitchen playset, a box of toys in the corner, and magnetic alphabet letters on a filing cabinet. Moran specializes in working with young people.
At least 90% are children. And by children, I call kids up to the age of 21, 22, even up to 24 or 25, because we know that the brain is still developing, still maturing, and still changing up through the age of 25.
Are you working with kids? I mean, is this intentional, or is this where you're needed, or is it a bit of both?
It's definitely a need because not a lot of people really want to work with kids. It takes a different kind of individual to love working with children and to want to do that. And that's where my heart is. I have always loved working with kids. I believe I can make the biggest difference working with children than working with adults, because if you change a child, you change not only that individual's life for the rest of that individual's life, but you also change everybody else that child comes into contact with.
Moran is based out of Charleston, but she's worked all over the state. She says a lot of her clients fall into that category of disconnected youth, and that the phenomenon appears to be getting worse here.
The figure, I think, in 2017, the most recent figure, was that 17% of West Virginians within this age group are part of this phenomenon. And the national average was about 12. So it's particularly high here. Have you talked with many young people who would identify as this or would fall into this category?
Yes. I've talked to quite a few of them. I've got several of them on my caseload. I have more casual relationships with several others. It's a prevalent problem, and it appears to be growing. Several of the individuals with whom I work, for a lot of them, it's depression. For a lot of them, it goes back to that learned helplessness. Nothing I do is going to make any difference. It's not going to matter. Nothing I do is going to matter. Why should I even bother?
What are some of these conversations? Like, what are you hearing from them in these conversations?
That it just doesn't matter, that it doesn't make any difference. I can't find anything I want to do. Nothing interests me. I really believe a lot of it is undiagnosed depression. I would bet that a lot of these kids have undisclosed trauma backgrounds or difficulties in their backgrounds.
Why is that?
In order to have a learned helplessness response, you have to have something occur to you, happen to you, that caused you to think that no matter what you did, you couldn't make a difference and it wasn't going to change anything. And trauma is the most likely thing to have caused that thought process. Being stuck in a situation where no matter what you did, it didn't make a difference. You couldn't change things. You couldn't improve your situation. And if you can't improve your situation, no matter how hard you try, why would you bother trying?
Moran says there's a straightforward explanation. West Virginia is a place filled with all sorts of trauma. She says people here, especially young people, are more likely to fall into a pattern of learned helplessness. She says that's when someone tries to do something to improve their situation in life, but is met with negative outcomes over and over again. The result? Some people stop trying.
I feel that it's hard to speak in generalities often about the state, but would you say that we are living in an area where there's a particularly high amount of trauma, and what those traumas are that a West Virginian might experience that might explain why this is higher than the national average?
We have very, very high levels of substance abuse in this area, not just the opioid crisis, but also a lot of drinking and other drug uses that cause that kind of trauma to kids. Because let's face it, kids can't control what their parents do or do not do. That is a learned helplessness situation. We have a very high level of domestic violence in our state, and that is another situation. Kids watch the domestic violence. I can't save my mother. I can't save myself. I can't save anybody no matter what I do. It doesn't make a difference, and sometimes if I intervene, it makes things worse. So why would I do anything? It's safer to just sit here and not move and not be noticed.
Moran says this learned helplessness even extends out to the professional world, a result of West Virginia's decades-long economic downturn.
We also have a situation where there is such high unemployment in West Virginia that kids are watching their parents go through learned helplessness. And so some of it very well may be a learned behavior. Dad's gone out and he's tried to get a job and he's tried to get a job and he's tried to get a job. Every coal mine he's ever worked for has closed down. He's been laid off. He's been laid off. He's been laid off. When you see your parent going through that, well, why would I even go get trained? Why bother going to get a job? It's not going to make any difference. I'm not going to be able to keep it anyway.
Moran says what might sound like a fairly benign conversation to most people is a red flag for her.
One individual who should be in high school now is not, has absolutely no ambition, can't say what they want to do when they should be graduating this spring from high school. Most likely won't because they haven't done any of their work. No idea what they want to do this summer. I'm just going to stay here and play on my phone and play video games. There's nothing else I want to do.
She says the shame and stigma that can follow being disconnected doesn't help.
It probably is not the driving factor, but for a lot of these individuals, you've got some shame, you've got some embarrassment, but the learned helplessness and those overlying depressive symptoms are taking precedence over that. They don't have the skills or the ability or the support in order to overcome that.
How do you fix that?
You don't fix anything. You provide skills, you teach abilities, you support, you encourage, you guide. We don't fix because these people aren't broken. They have been through some horrendous experiences, or they have chemical imbalances, or they are in bad situations. They're not broken. They just need help, support, and skills.
I like what Colleen Moran says. You can't fix anything because these young people aren't broken. They just need help and support and skills. This is a challenging divide. The difference between young people who get stuck and those who find a transition from school to whatever comes next. Plenty of research acknowledges that our education systems don't do enough to prepare some teens for the next chapter. This period, from about 16 to 24, is a time when many young people cultivate abilities that can lead them to a good and satisfying life. They gain knowledge, credentials, social skills, and networks. They also develop strategies to handle stress and learn resiliency. I believe it's a big mistake to think about these stuck young people as a them. When they can't make this transition, our society pays a dear price in terms of reduced competitiveness, lower tax revenues, and higher health, social services, and social justice costs. But we know America can handle this. After the Great Recession, the national youth disconnection rate fell for 8 consecutive years. The bad news is that our pandemic economy is certain to erase many of those gains. It will disproportionately hit Black and brown young people. And a person's zip code matters. The average disconnection rate in rural areas and the South is much higher than other regions. Ultimately, our challenge is to welcome these young people and to help them see their options as they find their way. You've been listening to Us and Them. Our team for this episode is me, Trey Kay, Kyle Vass, Brad Stratton, and Kate Smith. Special thanks to Harmony House in Huntington, West Virginia for allowing us to follow their work. Michael Lipton and Tristan Lozow wrote and performed the Us and Them show music. Mark Lerner designed our logo, and Lelena Price provides us with images for the web. The marvelous people at PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting make Us and Them possible. So do grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the West Virginia Humanities Council, and the CRC Foundation. This episode is supported with a grant from the Claude Worthington Benedum Foundation. Us and Them was originally developed with assistance from the mentorship program at AIR, the Association of Independents in Radio. Hey, stay connected, everyone. We'll see you next time on Us and Them.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.